Don't think other people have the right to choose to go like back to elementary and stuff, so we've been shuffling those teachers around the middle school quite a bit. We probably don't have enough teachers in that particular building.
It's very tight. Denny was away from the building for 8 days, and so for 8 consecutive days. And I've been there, you know, filling in for him, but I've never been there for that length of time. He and I had a long conversation this morning about once you're there for that period of time, just being able to see what the needs are. And I joked with, I think it was John, that I'm 5'8.5", but if I was there a whole year, I'd be 5'6", because I'm just not be thought of as they were 20 years ago. About sitting in that office and disciplining kids and not being out and around. We need them to be instructional leaders. And really that's how principals are trained today, is as instructional leaders. And I'm not being rude, Dave, when I say I don't really care what those other districts do, because it's kind of like our special ed scores when the AEA said, well, that's kind of a state problem. I really don't care. I want our kids in East Sac County to do better than that are in our special education programs. And I want our kids in our middle school to have opportunities. I can tell you firsthand examples of at-risk issues in our middle school. We had something happen Friday that the counselor and I were at this building until 6:30 with a family over a very serious issue with a middle school student. And that didn't have anything to do with achievement, but affects achievement. And so if we want those things to go well for kids. Here's the other thing. You voted for allowable growth for at risk. I mean, so it does pay for part of the salaries of some people that serve at-risk kids, but generally what you'd be thinking is that you'd have somebody in each building just kind of organizing that. It's not as typical in elementaries to have it. So the person at the Wall Lake building would be a little bit atypical from the elementary. It would be more common just to be at a middle school or a high school to have staff person. But the person at the high school was hired because the principal needed and a counselor needed to have time to do their jobs, and that isn't necessarily incomplete work and failing grades. So I would argue the opposite point and say that it would be good money spent for the district. If the district would approve that position, then it would have to be posted in the buildings to see if anyone internally wanted to transfer, to the position or not. But if you want to wait and think about it and actually give me approval in another month or disapproval, either way, you can do that and tell me what information you'd like to have to know what that person might do if you need something more.
Our biggest class, though, is coming up this morning from the 8th grade to the 9th grade. Is that right? So we're going from a larger section. Is that true?
Yes. But if you talk to our middle school teachers, our 5th grade and our 8th grade are full of things to deal with. I saw more 5th grade kids really in not principal situations but counseling situations over all sorts of issues in those 8 days that I was there. I'm going to tell you, I feel like I have a very good read on that building, and I would not recommend adding a position. You know, you think about what we went through last year, and this is sort of emotional for me to talk about, but as hard as it was for you to make decisions about cutting staff, those were people that I knew and I worked with every single day. And it was one of the most awful years that I ever spent, was sitting down with people that I worked with for a long time, who were really pretty darn good employees. But we had to cut staff. So it doesn't feel very good to have to come back to talk to you about this. The thing is, we did what we should do last year, knowing that we tightened it up a lot, and then that we'd have to look at it again. I don't think it has to do with numbers. I think it has to do with who the people are in the building that you have. And how successful do we want our kids to be? What do we want for them? And what do I want for them? I want them to have more opportunity than what some of them get, because we need more help with that. And our teachers work hard in our middle school.
Even though our 8th grade is moving up into the high school, then how many 4th grade children are coming into the 5th grade?
I have that written down somewhere.
All the principals are gone. I mean, is that going to be a fairly...
It won't be as big as the 8th grade moving out. The 8th grade is big. It's our biggest grade, K-12. It's almost 90 kids. And we'll probably get about 75, I'd say, coming in at the max. Probably 75 coming in from 4th grade. So it will be fewer kids.
So none of the individual teachers can slip in and help and assist.
They already
66.
do. They do things.
56?
66 in 4th grade this year.
they do things. We have teachers doing interventions. They have 7 periods a day and 1 prep. You know, if I'm teaching science 7 periods a day and I have a prep, I don't have a lot of time to work with my most at-risk kids because I'm in class every period. And if they don't happen to have a study hall, and our kids in middle school don't have many study halls. We have kids that have 20 assignments they haven't done, and they need to be somewhere with somebody just like our high school kids are. I hired a substitute for 5 days while I was there, and all I said to that person, here are 5 kids who have gazillions of pieces of makeup work to do. They're plenty smart enough to do it. We just go to their teachers, tell them they're not going to be in class until they get this work made up. So we spent 5 times $90 a day, and I think that's inexpensive in terms of a kid not failing a class. And once the kid found out he was going to get, if he got a passing grade on it, even though it was late, they said, you just got to do it. You can't opt for a 0. But you know what? The principal can't do that. I couldn't do that for 180 days of a school year, and I'm pretty ambitious, and I get it. I know what to do, but I could not do that and then do everything else I would need to do as a principal. I'm just going to tell you. And I don't want so many kids in credit recovery, because then they miss what they're supposed to be taking during the regular day. And
So if we had this at-risk person, that could prevent some of that.
it might be able to. We brought probably a dozen kids to the high school that were making up 8th grade courses. So they start out right away making up 8th grade English, and they're not in 9th grade, or we put them in both. And
We have some real issues in the middle school that need to be dealt with, and I guess if it needs extra people, then perhaps that's what we need.
And we have the funding. So
we can, and we'll look at that when we get to the budget, but yes, we do. I wouldn't ask you if there wasn't the money to do it, and I'm not just looking to spend money. Sure. I guess a year from now, and another superintendent, maybe you won't get the wholehearted support for the person, but you know, if we find the person that can do this sort of job, we aren't going to want them to be gone. We're going to want them to be in that middle school to provide support for those kids.
So this won't be a coordinator, but it'll be a teacher.
They're going to coordinate, but they're on a teacher's salary. They're on a teacher's salary. Our at-risk coordinators right now are teachers. They have teaching licenses. They're on teacher contracts. So Teresa Tigas, who's the high school at-risk coordinator, she just gets paid on the salary schedule that John showed you, wherever she is.
Contracts as secondary teacher.
So you're talking about a teacher that's going to make $35,000 a year, and there's 30 kids that they're going to help. That's $1,000 a kid. I think it's worth it. $1,000 per kid.
You think you're looking at 30 kids in that whole middle school?
Probably 60.
It's definitely worth it.
So then it's down to $500.
I don't know if that person can manage 60 kids. Our high school person probably, well, she probably sees 50 different kids in a year because kids are in and out as she gets them kind of caught up and they get back on track, you know, then they get shoved back out and more kids get pulled in because something else has happened to somebody else, you know, by that time.
I don't think you can put a dollar figure on a kid, but I think
No,
$1,000.
It's really part of our mission, you know.
Well,
I think we have a responsibility to do this.
And you know, you think about having worked with me, I have not recommended positions that to have extra staff because frankly, 24/7 I think about the finances of the district. And if I didn't think we could afford to do it, I would not be recommending. I don't think we can afford not to do it for the sake of the students that need some assistance. And you know what? If we can't find the right person, we're just not going to hire a teacher to have one, because that will be more painful for the counselor and the principal than having no one. And the students, absolutely.
Well, I think we need to say that, you know, Barb, I think you're doing a really good job of watching the finances. Dave, I think that was wonderful that you went and did that. But I still think this is great discussion. I mean, I think we need the person because I think our kids deserve it. I think both of you guys, I mean, you did wonderful.